You're listening to ESOPOD, the Folience ESOP podcast. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the ESOPOD, the Folience ESOP podcast. I am Sean Hoy, and today I'm joined by Chris Snyder, the president and CEO of Folience. How's it going?
John, it's going good. Thank you for making the time to have me this morning. And this is I think maybe my first official podcast experience. So you're going to get a real rookie here. But I'll do my best and look forward to it.
Great. No, I think it'll be great. This is my fourth video, so it's not really, I'm not really an expert yet myself. So we'll learn as we go, I guess.
Good. Good deal.
So a lot of people probably have met you, at least in the company. Last year, you and Daniel did a road show where you drove around all the different business units and gave people an introduction to who you are and where you came from. So I figured we'd do a mini version of that because some people might have joined the company since then, or maybe they're not here yet. They'll join later and watch this video and get to know you that way. So who are you?
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I can't claim to be an Iowan by birth. I was born in Indiana, but we moved to Iowa when I was 10, so pretty much grew up here in the Hawkeye State. Grew up in Davenport, Iowa, and after graduating from high school, I went in the Army for 4 years. So I'm a veteran active duty Army and had a really cool job in the Army. I was a German linguist in military intelligence. So learned German and actually lived in Germany for 2.5 years as part of my military experience, but never had any intentions of making it a career. I wanted to serve my country was part of the reason, but also wanted to be able to pay for college on my own and not be a burden to my family. So Army had really good benefits for college, so thus my choice to enlist there. Got out, went to University of Iowa, did my undergrad in finance, and worked for a couple of years in Des Moines. Also got married at that time, and then I went to Chicago to get my MBA at Northwestern University at the Kellogg School there, and graduated. Went back to work for Amoco for a year in brand marketing. So Amoco, for I think everybody's maybe familiar, maybe not, because their brand isn't around as much anymore. But that's a petroleum marketing and refining business. It was bought by British Petroleum at one point. So, but left there after a year after grad school and moved back to Iowa, and that started my career in agriculture and manufacturing. So almost all of my career has been around running businesses that were in the manufacturing space, but primarily within agriculture, whether it was animal health and nutrition products, products for human nutrition and supplements and things like that, or related to agriculture, renewable energy. So based in Iowa, not a big surprise. A lot of my work experience has been in around agriculture. And then also had a little bit of a stint, you'll probably be glad to hear, in software. So was the CEO of a healthcare technology software company based in Madison, Wisconsin for 2.5 years, which was a great experience to learn about a completely different industry. So I look fondly on that experience that helps create, the wholeness, I suppose, of who I am as a leader today. So, but then I joined Folience last September. And you mentioned Daniel, and I think Daniel did a great job. I have huge leadership shoes to fill, but where Daniel's strengths were probably in finance and mergers and acquisitions, my strengths are more as an operating CEO, and specifically from in a manufacturing setting. So as we look at Folience and the three businesses within the portfolio, certainly Cimarron and Lifeline, because they're making things. That's a model I'm more familiar with. In the Gazette and what we're doing on the media side is something that I'm learning a lot and learning as quickly as I can. So, but yeah, veteran, married, as I mentioned, father, Iowan for the most part. And been leading businesses throughout my career, primarily in agriculture, but the focus there is manufacturing and a CEO who's got probably more or operations oriented.
First, thank you for your service. And
Hmm.
then
Yeah, my
also,
pleasure.
what brought you to Folience? What interested you, or did you just get a
Hmm.
random call one day?
Yeah. Well, in today's day and age, not surprisingly, it was through LinkedIn, and they were looking for, I think, Iowa-based CEOs who understood, how to make things, and so it was more of a cold call over LinkedIn from the recruiter who was working with Daniel and the board to fill the role. And I just was super intrigued by the diversity of the portfolio. I have ambulance manufacturing, trailer manufacturing, and media business, number one. Number two was an ESOP. As I look at my career arc, if you will, I've worked for publicly traded businesses, I've worked for privately owned businesses, private family owned businesses. And in all of those instances, while they were great jobs and great experiences, um, I feel like working for an employee-owned business is where I needed to be maybe all along. But certainly, I appreciate working for an employee-owned business now more than ever, having worked for those other ownership structures. So it just felt like the right next step for me as a leader to lead a company that was an employee-owned business. And then probably last would be the location. So having an opportunity to do all of that and stay in Iowa and stay in eastern Iowa. We're living in central Iowa at the time, so being able to move east, closer to the Quad Cities. Like I said, I grew up in Davenport, closer to Chicago, where I've got one of my kids lives, and I think the second one's headed that way. So from a personal perspective, being in eastern Iowa was going to be a good place to live. So all of those things added together is what piqued my interest. And then once I got to know Daniel and the board, and during the interview process, I got to go to Lifeline and meet Randy Smith and see what they do there. I was completely bought in almost immediately during that point of the interview process.
You said you have worked for publicly traded, family owned,
Hmm.
different types of companies. What
Hmm.
differences do you see? Just kind of fresh eyes into the
Hmm.
employee owned world.
Yeah. Well, I tell this story, and this is being recorded, so I want to be careful. when but the story is this: I was having lunch last summer before I joined the company with a former head of finance that had reported to me, and we were having lunch, and he is younger than I am, and he's already retired. And as we were having lunch, I just asked him, his name's Bob. I said, Bob, why did you retire so early? And his response really kind of caught me off guard, but it helps answer your question. His response was, I got tired of making other people rich. And and so as I was thinking about that lunch and contemplating this role, it's not like Bob or I starved. I mean, we had good jobs. We were, the people that we worked for, we were paid well. We had good benefits, so no complaints whatsoever. But we were making a family who was already wealthy even more wealthy. We were making, stockholders on Wall Street, more money. So the idea of so I think it's okay to say that we want to make the owners of Folience rich. I like to say it that we want a secure financial future. We want to make all of our financial futures more secure. We want to have a more secure retirement. And working as the CEO for a company where that's the goal, to me felt so organic. It was so right to come into a role from that perspective, given where I'd come from after all my years of work. It just felt right. And so that for me is the probably the number one thing is Daniel will tell you, and I hope he's okay with me saying this, but the world of ESOP and capitalism fit together great, because capitalism is about, optimizing the value of the business and working hard, having everyone working in that direction. But doing it in the world of ESOP it just feels more right because we're optimizing the value of the business for the benefit of all 500 plus owners of Foliance. So having employee owners versus these private owners or public owners, and still being, I guess it's safe to say, a capitalist, right? I'm as a CEO. I want us to grow. I want us to be more profitable, but I want all of that so that we can increase the value of the company, so that we all, you and me and whoever else is watching this, that's a Folience employee, that those employee owners get the benefit of that long-term benefit of secure financial future and a more secure retirement. The alignment, how that aligns all of our interests, is to me very powerful. And probably my biggest challenge is how do we get all 500 of us, thinking that way and being as passionate about it as the most passionate employee is. We want that passion in every employee to say, as I'm doing my job, I want to be making decisions and thinking about it as an employee owner. And I do that as the CEO. And I want you to do that in your role. And I want everybody in Folience, no matter which business unit they're in or shared services for that matter, I want them to think the same way and have that same passion. And that's probably what I think is my biggest challenge is how do we ensure that we are all 500 of us really thinking that way, um, and, uh, um, and working hard to make sure that's the case.
Yeah, that's great. I know the ESOP communication team has kind of those same conversations. How can we engage
Yeah.
with employees and make people use their license to act every day?
Yep.
So you said
Yep.
you've
Yep. For
you've
sure.
been to all the different companies. You've
Hmm.
gotten into maybe a little bit of their process.
Hmm.
What are you optimistic about? Like, what do they have going so far that's working well, and maybe
Yeah.
what opportunities do they have in the future?
Yeah. I think the one thing that I understood or Daniel talked about, but when you're being recruited, I think everybody that's watching has gone through a recruiting process, right? Your head's kind of swimming. You're hearing a million things from a bunch of different people, and plus you're trying to stay on message with your own talking points about you and why you would be good for that job. So, but what Daniel talked about was these are world-class brands that represent excellence in their respective industries. And that sounded good when during the recruiting process, but now that I've been at the facilities, I've met the leadership teams, and more importantly, I've been in the marketplace, specifically with Cimarron and Lifeline, because they are uh, marketed through a dealer network. So it's not like there's a salesperson that's out there selling trailers directly to an end user. Cimarron uses dealers, and the dealers then sell Cimarron trailers to that end person. Kind of like buying a car, right? When you go to the car dealership, you're not talking to the employee of Ford. You're talking to an employee of the dealership. And the same is true for Lifeline and the way we sell ambulances. So me spending time with the dealers in the marketplace to me has been as valuable as the time I've spent in the plants themselves. And absolutely 100% consistent with what Daniel was telling me. The dealers and the people I've met in the marketplace, even competitors to our businesses at trade shows that I've gone to, speak so highly and consistently about the quality of the brand. And as a brand marketer at heart, that's just music to my ears. and, and a huge competitive advantage. So, when things go south, economically, people that are still buying will tend to want to go to the brands they trust and the brands that represent quality. And so I feel really strong about Cimarron and Lifeline. And then the Gazette, even though it isn't sold through dealerships, the Gazette brand, if you will, in the state of Iowa, as far as news goes, there aren't many independently owned newspapers left. Most of the big newspapers. So if I look where I came from, Des Moines, the Des Moines Register, Davenport, the Quad City Times, those are both corporately owned newspapers. They're not independently owned like the Gazette. So amongst the brand for the Gazette is an independently owned, fair, fact-based, journalist-driven media company. And that applies to Southeast Iowa Union and that applies to Central Iowa Union as well. So now the challenges of the Gazette are different, based upon that business and the industry that it's in. But that consistency, whereas the dealers will talk glowingly about Cimarron and Lifeline. I know, I'm a consumer of news, and so I can tell you that the Gazette's brand is just as strong as the other two. So to me, that's where the opportunity lies, is how do you grow those companies, now that you've got a really great competitive advantage in the brand. So, and I would say probably true for all three businesses. The opportunities for improvement is around what I would call continuous process improvement. So that's the operator in me, right? And I'll try not to get too jargony, but
Go for it.
if you look at, yeah, if we look at the businesses today, we've got a factory in Sumner, we've got a factory in Sumner, Iowa, a factory in Manhattan, Kansas, and a factory in Chickasha, Oklahoma. And if all we did was keep those three locations for the foreseeable future, but our goal was to how do we get more efficient? How do we, get new products? How do we grow within our existing footprint? That's where continuous process improvement comes in. So I just think there's a ton of opportunity at both businesses, and they've got people there, engineers primarily, whose job it is to say, well, if we do, how do we do more than one ambulance a day? Or how do we do more than two trailers a day? And if we can get that from one to two, that's phenomenal growth. And if we can get that from two to three, holy mackerel, that's real growth. That's easy to say from my office here in Cedar Rapids,
Yeah,
but
yeah. You don't have to go weld.
the yeah, exactly. If I get a welding helmet and go up there and learn how to weld aluminum, I'd be shoulder to shoulder with those guys. But or so there's process flow, there's automation, and then there's the human factors, right? So a comprehensive continuous process improvement plan is what we will continue to push for. And and that is the operator in me coming through loud and clear, is to say, if we're not going to go buy a bunch of businesses to grow, which I'm not saying that we won't. It's just right now the focus is on how do we optimize the businesses we've got. And I feel really confident about, I've brought that to organizations and companies that I've led in the past. And the good news is that those organizations are already down that path. So those are two things I'd say. The brand strength and the brand equity is a huge competitive advantage, but the opportunity is around efficiency and optimization, and that's where continuous process improvement comes in.
You said that's one of the biggest opportunities. Would you also say that's maybe a struggle, or what do you see as maybe your biggest struggle
Mhm.
coming into this company?
Yeah. Well, for me personally, I think the biggest struggle is getting, to be a good understanding of the Gazette and really all the businesses, right? Again, I've been around manufacturing, but I haven't made trailers, ambulances, or run a media business. So understanding the variety in our portfolio would be one thing. But the other thing that I've had to kind of struggle with, if that's the right word, as an operating leader is to take a step back and say, these companies have great leaders. So Ben Jansen, Randy Smith, and Kelly Homewood, I wasn't hired to do their jobs. They are the presidents of those businesses, and they are really, really good at what they do. I was hired to kind of coach and mentor and to develop them as leaders, but also bring, what I know about operations and efficiencies and throughput to, the existing portfolio. I've done M&A, not as much as Daniel. I have a finance undergrad and work in corporate finance, so I can hold my own when it comes to that stuff. But clearly, hopefully, everybody can tell I'm passionate about operations and people and culture. So for me, the struggle, again, I don't think that's necessarily the right word, but yes, let's say that word is to not want to get in and run these businesses and to realize they've got excellent leaders, and I need to bring to those leaders my skills, and I also need to bring to those leaders my experience. And so kind of reconciling that desire to jump in and do stuff with, the focus on, nope, that's not why you're here. You're here to, bring that experience and to help them be better leaders. That's been, one of the things where I've been really focusing myself.
Speaking of leaders, I know we internally do
Hmm.
leadership development training, and I I believe you have just started
Hmm.
going through that along with another
Yep.
group of guys, a group of people coming into the company.
Yep.
Anything jump
Yep.
out to you as a cool thing you learned?
Yeah. I'd say two things. The first is the fact that we even do it. For a company our size, I've been in businesses that were much bigger than Folience and bigger than the individual portfolio businesses that didn't have their own dedicated training and development team like we do. So it is a huge benefit and competitive advantage for us to even have the resource. So that's number one. And so just a total breath of fresh air to see the organization even offer Leadership 1.0 to people who aren't even necessarily have direct reports. Most places, before you even get to go to a leadership class, you have to be managing people. So for this company to have the resource and to make it available to folks who may not have direct reports, but who have been identified as future potential leaders, to me is very forward looking, speaks great about the culture of the business. So that would be number one. Number two is, I would say, about the training itself was how comprehensive it was. So when they asked for comments about, well, what do we think about the training experience? One of the things that I suggested was, because it's so comprehensive and you learn so many things, is how do you create kind of a cheat sheet for the people that have gone through that? So when they get back to their day job, you know, they can very easily reach back into what they learned, take those tools and apply them in their role, in their job. Even if they're not managing people, you learn ways to communicate. You learn, how to assess the person and what kind of personality are they, and how does that influence the way you communicate with them. So just, I think I ended up documenting 8 or 9 tools that you learned over the course of what amounted to about a day and a half. So, and I'm fine with that level of content, but I think what we need to do and then offer is a kind of a cheat sheet or a shortcut to all the tools, and then a toolkit, if you will, to say, okay, here's what you've got in your kit. And so as you're in a leadership role, you remind yourself that, hey, you know how to do these things, but then how to quickly open up that toolbox and get to the tool you need. So I was really excited that we do it. As I said, we even have that resource, and we offer that training. And then I was really inspired by the comprehensive nature of the training. But I think for new leaders, especially, giving them that cheat sheet so that they know how to apply what they've learned when they get back to their day job, was something that I thought we might be able to do better there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I took that the 1.0. It's been a
Hmm.
while, and just like you said,
Hmm.
thinking back on, oh yeah, I do remember doing frame of reference, but it's been so long that I
Yep.
don't know like the bullet points that we were talking about,
Right.
and how to apply it still. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yep. Yeah.
I know we do kind of quarterly or every other month application groups, and that's I think used as a
Hmm.
refresher on some of those skills that people learn,
Right.
which I think is
Yep.
very helpful to me personally.
Yeah. Again, those are unique, and for a company our size to do things like that speaks to how, I think, forward-looking the shared service leadership team is, and also I think speaks to Daniel, and Daniel's belief that those things are important, and making the resources available to do those. Whether it's the training itself, or, to your point, the ability, and the follow-up sessions with the applications groups to try to keep it alive and well, um, is all comprehensive, and it's really exciting that we make that investment as a business in our people.
You mentioned a while ago
Hmm.
culture. Do you
Yep.
see any immediate difference in the culture here at Folience, just being an ESOP versus other
Hmm.
companies you've been at before?
Yep. Well, I think, culture is such a, what's the right word? I mean, it's in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. And as much as we want, and we work hard at creating culture, all 500 of us are going to have a different take on what culture means to us. And so at a company level, we have to be intentional about culture. We have to be intentional about the people we hire, and the recruiting process has to include some questions to make sure that that person's going to fit our culture. Once the person is hired, how they're onboarded, and over the life of that employee, you have to be very intentional about culture, if you're serious about it. So, working with all the different companies that I've been a leader of over the years, those are my approach to, emphasizing culture and how to make it great. The difference with the ESOP, and this is a double-edged sword. So arguably, being an ESOP, it should be easier, I would say, because we're all employee owners. So, if I'm intentional about culture, I would expect every employee to be intentional about culture because they're an owner just like me. You know, we are equals. You and me and the group of those people in the leadership training that I was a part of, I'm equal to all 500 of you guys because we're all employee owners. And as much as I care about culture, I want all 500 of us to care about culture. But that isn't always the case, right? Because it's just, we're all different. So, but that intentionality, and then ideally it should be easier for an ESOP. But I think ESOP versus private versus family versus public, you just never stop. Culture and the development and the sustainability of culture never stops. You're never done. And you have to be intentional about that. So I don't know that there's anything necessarily easier about culture in an ESOP versus a non-ESOP. But within Folience, I think we have to recognize the portfolio is really diverse, between a media company and an Iowa-based ambulance business and an Oklahoma-based, horse and livestock trailer business, just where we're located. So I can tell you, I mentioned that, I was in the Army, and, the Army, I lived in California, Texas, Massachusetts, and then Europe. And then throughout my career prior to coming to Foliant, I ran businesses that were global. I'd been to China and Japan and Russia and Mexico and Argentina and, throughout many times in my career. And so I really got an appreciation for how different cultures really make a difference in how you lead, and you have to be attuned to, in Europe, Southern Europe versus Northern Europe. And if you have a plant in Spain and a plant in Denmark, which I had a business where I had that, I couldn't call it culture and expect that to be the same. And the same is true here. The culture between Oklahoma and Sumner and the Gazette are very different. And part of that is geography, and part of that is industry. So there isn't any one Foliant culture, I would say, um, other than what we try to emphasize around, the ESOP, and with me being present in those facilities and communicating about the ESOP and, the things that I think make us different and special as a company. What happens, at the plant in Chickasha, I can influence that, but that culture is going to be different, on a day-to-day basis than what we're doing, let's say in Sumner, or even what happens in Manhattan, because there's a distinct difference between, Manhattan, Kansas, and Chickasha, Oklahoma. So, what it boils down to is the leaders of those businesses, and that's where I spend a lot of my time. So again, Ben and Randy and Kelly is trying to help them, number one, recognize, and this was easy to do, recognize that culture is important. All three of our business leaders, and of course Kathy leading shared services, they know culture is important and to be intentional. And so I just bring a little bit more experience and credibility about why that really is important to the overall success of the business, and that there are 500 employee owners that really want them all to be successful. So um, it's a unique topic, culture, and and I've been around long enough to know that it's kind of hard to boil that down to any one or two things, other than you have to be intentional, you have to care about it, and as long as you've got leaders that are care about it and they're intentional, then I know. And it's never done. It's continually improving. It's continually developing. So, but I'm passionate about culture, and I spend a lot of my day, thinking about how do we get a good culture and how do we make sure that that doesn't change and we get that across all 500 of us.
Well, interesting segue from that. We at
Hmm.
Folience do the pulse surveys, so kind of a
Hmm.
health check.
Yep.
Have you
Yep.
seen any of the results from those, and what's your thoughts on how we do those?
Yeah. I think that the fact that we do them is amazing. And the fact we do them twice a year is also amazing. Again, I've been in organizations that don't do them at all. They may only do them once a year. So the fact that we do them and we do them twice a year across the entire business, all business units and shared service, so all of Folience gets it. So that's the easy part. So doing the surveys and even doing them twice a year, arguably that's the easy part. The two hard parts, if you will, one is getting people to take the survey, getting participation. So offering surveys once a year or twice a year is great, but if you don't get participation, then the value of that effort is diminished. So number one is we've got to get good participation across all 500 of us, twice a year to make those things worthwhile. So that's hard part number one. The hard part number two is then what action are you going to take? There's an old adage, as it relates to these things, employee surveys, engagement surveys, employee satisfaction surveys, is if you ask people to take their time to answer these questions and then you don't do anything as a leadership team and as a company, that is, I don't know how to phrase it, but it's so bad. It's a sin, it's whatever you want to call it. It's just horrible. It's the worst thing in the world. You're better off not even serving in the first place. So, and I think if you ask the presidents, one of the things that I hold them accountable to, from like a performance expectations perspective, is you will have an action plan and you will report back to your employees that here are the actions we're taking. So we surveyed you, we gathered your input, we listened, we acted, and then we're going to circle back and tell you here are the actions we took. And hopefully the next time we do a survey, we'll see the needle move. And you can't fix everything at once. So you have to be, again, the word intentional to say, okay, here are the one, two, or three things that we're going to fix, the actions that we're going to take as a result of what we heard. So, and that puts some burden on the business. If you do two surveys a year, and let's just say you pick two actions per survey, that's four things that over the course of the year that you better be doing. You just can't ask and listen and say thank you. So
Yeah,
I think those are the two things about the surveys. I'm so excited that we do them. I'm really excited we do them twice a year because that's even better data to help us assess how things are going with our employees. But we need employee participation. And then as a leadership team, we have to have our action plan and we have to close that communication loop back with the employees to say, here, we listened and we acted.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I bet you've had a ton of ESOP education just kind of dumped on you and
Yep.
having to absorb all of that. Is there
Yep.
anything that you've learned recently that you want to make sure every employee owner at Folience knows?
Yeah. Yep. That's a great question. If I seem hesitant, it's because I don't want to misspeak because this is such an important, understanding it and being fluent. So again, I mentioned I was a German linguist, so I kind of use language as an analogy for a lot of things in business. So, you know, being fluent in how I speak about the ESOP, I'm still working on my fluency. But I think that the things about the ESOP that I love, and it kind of circles back to some of the first comments I made, is it's about a secure financial future. So, and I could say the same thing if it was a 401k match, right? That worked for a company that was not an ESOP, but we need people to open a 401k. We need people to save in that 401k. Because if they're not, when you're young and, you have, a lot of bills maybe, or a young family, or maybe college debt, all kinds of reasons for people to say, well, I'm not going to, I'm not going to start yet. So I would say, whether it, and the ESOP for me is even, it's more important because that's, you're an owner. So, and the way you get the benefit of your ownership besides your allocation every year. So if you're an employee of the ESOP, you're given shares of the business for your effort, for your hard work. So that's our money, right? That's collectively the company's money that you're given for coming to work for us in the form of shares. And then every year you're with us, you get more shares, and that's called the allocation. And that plus, the money that you save in the 401k, that is your financial future. So when I say I want you to have a more secure financial future, I mean that I want you to save money in your 401k, and I want you to know that you have this whole other, and we use the word bucket, so I'm not 100% committed to the bucket analogy, but let's stick with it for today. So you have the 401k bucket, which is your money. And even if it's $10 a week, or I don't care how much, just get started saving. And then you have your ESOP bucket, which is your shares of the company as an owner. And so, the message I would say, and it's a constant message that I think CEOs in every company, regardless of how they're organized, are really targeting the younger workers, is to start saving. And if you are an ESOP owner, you definitely want to be cognizant of saving in your 401k, because when you get your 401k match, that's our money. That's the company's money that we're putting into your financial future. There's shares of the company that we're putting into your financial future, plus what you're contributing, out of your paychecks into your 401k. And if you don't start now, I don't care how old you are or what your financial situation is, then we're missing the strongest selling point of the ESOP, which is a more secure financial future. So there's lots of nuances around share price and share price reveal, and I'll be learning a lot more about that as we get into May and June, and we do the share reveal. And I'll work on how I'm going to communicate that. I'll probably borrow from Daniel the way he did it, but I'm going to bring my own approach in the way I communicate to that process. But that'll be kind of the next big education for Chris, is how do we do the share reveal process, and how I communicate that, and using that opportunity to remind everyone, every single employee owner, why why this helps your secure financial future. And if we're all working together, whether it's you in IT or a welder, at Lifeline or at Cimarron, if we are all thinking about our secure financial future as employee owners, then I know that great things will happen to our business. And no matter what happens within the economy, our businesses will thrive because we are employee owned.
Well, I can't really think of a better way to wrap things up than that. So, Chris, thank you very
Great.
much for joining me
Yeah.
today. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yep, likewise, Sean. I appreciate the invite and look forward to coming back, whenever you'll have me.
Yeah, great.
Cool. Well, you did a great job.
Thanks for listening to ESOPOD. If you want to get in touch, send me an email at esopod@folience.com.